We wanted this space that was totally outside the realms of familiarity and yet was connected to so many things that were familiar.
I'm attracted to things that other people consider trash, but I think mostly, kind of aesthetically, like I'm just sort of addicted to like foraging, like hunting for things, right? Mm-hmm. There's something about the process of finding your materials or actually letting them, like, I actually kind of believe that they find you that makes the whole sort of artistic process special and magical, and I can't help but keep them around. So it's kind of interesting being here at Elsewhere because I'm like kind of right at home, but it's also like someone else's stuff, so I feel kind of like weird.
Hi, my name is George Shear. I'm co-founder and director of Elsewhere, a living museum and artist residency set inside of a former thrift store downtown Greensboro. Myself and Stephanie came down to Greensboro actually for a concert. So the next morning, I was like, you gotta check out my grandmother's old store. It's been locked up for 6 years and no one knows what to do with it. So what if we were to come down here and move into the store and decide that nothing would be for sale and nothing would leave, and instead treat it like this massive puzzle or this sort of singular set, this archive. The history is embedded in this place. It is an archive and a time capsule of 60 years of this town, and also 60 years of like America. Yeah. And rather than like sell this stuff or get rid of it or put it away or turn it into a stale museum, we're actually going to invite some of the most creative, critical, engaged minds of our generation to come in and use these things to make works that become publicly available and interactive and engaged, and at the same time rethink what the museum can be in the 21st century. That was kind of our goal. That was kind of our idea, is to let this space speak through a process of continued arrangements and rearrangements. To assume that the page already is filled with words, it's just a matter of putting them in order.
It's cool thinking of this place as like a world, or like an ecosystem. Like we only have the resources we have, and you have to use them wisely. And I mean, it's weird. It's weird having to kind of clean as you go. Also, like you're like, oh, I want to work in this area. Oh my God, it's covered in dust, or there's baby dolls everywhere, or there's broken glass. And you have to find a place to put it. Like you're not, you're building on past people's projects, and everything here is important. And I really like that conceptually. I like this idea of the collection in a living space, like the objects in space are living and breathing.
I read about it as this living museum, and my first impression was, I can just delve in and use the materials as I see fit. And then you come here and you realize that there's an order to the madness.
Yeah, when I walked in for the first time, I was just blown away. I thought it was so beautiful. I had no idea of how big this place would be. Kept being met by different people, just going, hey, welcome, it's great to have you. And they were cooking up some delicious food. So like straight away, there's a great sense of community and enthusiasm. At Elsewhere, I am filling this room with mirrors. And then I'm going to put in a 4-channel surround sound music piece, and then I'm going to fill it with LEDs from the top. So hopefully then the LEDs will reflect. But aesthetically, the place looks great where it is right now. Because the thought of moving all the mirrors was painful. But I think the thought of working in here was painful because there's just so much dangerous glass everywhere. But I'm doing it.
You were drawn to the shiniest, most dangerous room.
For sure.
Coming to Elsewhere and seeing the collection and all of that, I immediately gravitated towards the kitchen area. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is the title of the piece. I imagine you coming in and seeing this armoire that is stacked to the brim with all these dishes that are just shaking and shaking, with the rumbling of audio that, because the speaker has been deconstructed and is facing in on the armoire, it's like this muffled conversation that's going on. I want you to get this sense of the building anticipation of the arrival of somebody. Yeah, I'm very comfortable with other artists coming in and building upon it. I feel like, in keeping with the concept of it, I'm opening it up to be destroyed and reassembled into something new.
When I was a kid, my dad worked at Burlington. It was a textile factory which moved overseas, and my mom worked at Converse, where they made the shoes, which moved overseas as well. So when I first started like making artwork, right, it was all about race. So you realize that like race is a huge issue that doesn't get talked about enough. However, like class is like a really big deal. You have these high-profile shootings that happen in the span of 3 or 4 days, right?
Yeah.
I get a call from George Shear, the founder of Elsewhere, who was seeing some of the stuff I was posting in response to that, and he said, you know, hey, if you want to use your time here to kind of deal with these issues, Elsewhere will support you. So I'm taking this room that is 10 by 10 by 4.5 feet, and it's becoming a microcosm of one of these communities that are affected by the war on drugs and mass incarceration.
And if we can change the kind of embedded cultures that do exist here, the certain conservatism that exists here, the racism that exists here, if we can address the histories that the South has around class and race and transform people's perceptions and transform the way that people live in this world, then we can, not only can we do it in other places, it will have an immense effect on all the other places.
Yeah.
It will drive their potential. It will drive them to make the changes that they ultimately need to make as well.
You know, living in these big cities, it's hard to feel like you actually can affect the environment. Why does it even care about you? What are you doing for it? But it's really nice that you can, like, you know, help improve this place and grow this place and become part of it.
This is the Postmodern Museum.
It is certainly a reflection and a deconstruction of the concept of a museum. First off, that museums frameworks on white walls, but also just in a very practical way, like people like don't know what to do with themselves. A museum helps guide them, but it also brings in the notion of living. Artists used to live in the Louvre at a point, right? So yes, the museum, yes, the residency program, yes, the kitchen and queer lab and all these like operations that we have. But the moment when like an artist that was here in 2009 or was here in like 2020, who 10 years later decides to organize a group of artists to come down and run a project here or have a conference or embed themselves and produce their next work that they've been thinking about for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
That to me, like when this really becomes this like centerpiece and home for like some of the most amazing critical creative thinkers, and this becomes a dock for them, a hub for them, right? Not a moment, not an isolated moment of a movement that happens in Paris and then disappears over time, but actually like a sustained, available space where people continue to like touch and connect through. That to me is the excitement of the next 40 years. And I was just giving a tour to this woman today. She's in her 70s. And she came into the space. We went through all 3 floors. And when she came back down and walked out onto the street, she was like, oh, and the world is here. Right? And it was that moment of having gone through the entire building room by room, seeing all these different spaces, moving from a room filled with army surplus to a room filled with an artist painting on the walls and doing projects, to rooms full of fabric, to old boarding house rooms, to bedrooms, to kitchen spaces, right? All these moments that are all just like flashes as you pass through so many different spaces compressed, and so many different objects that at every moment it's like that's from the 80s, that's from the 60s, that's from the 70s, that's from the 90s. At every moment you're seeing time compressed and you're seeing everything present all at once and configured in unique ways that by the time you walk out of the space and you step back onto the street and you like see the rain, you feel the rain, you see cars and you look at the sidewalk and you look at restaurants and stores and so on and so forth, it suddenly becomes strange. The world becomes strange. And that's what Elsewhere needs to be doing. That's